Hello and welcome to the Blue Collar Wealth Club podcast. I am your host, Jerry Garcia.
And I'm your other host, Sheena White. And today we want to talk about controlling the controllables. So I think so many times in business, especially being in election year, everyone's a little freaked out right now. Like, what's going to happen? But we don't know, right? And we don't control that. And so there's always going to be outside market conditions, right, that we have no control over, right? We can't control the Fed. We can't control interest rates. We can't control, who is a potential presidential candidate.
Gas prices, material costs, economic downturn.
Everything. There's so much out there that we cannot control. But that doesn't mean that, we should just throw in the towel and be like, whatever, because there's so much stuff in your business that you can.
Well, and disclaimer, we are recording this before the election, so we don't know who the president is yet.
No idea.
Because by the time this comes out, we may or may not have already found that answer.
And honestly, it doesn't really matter either direction.
Well, that's what we're talking about, right? Controlling the controllables, because regardless of who wins this election, regardless of what you think of that particular candidate, you have to find a way to make your business work, right? Throwing in the towel, if that's an option for you, then, that's your choice. But ultimately, people have found a way to have businesses be successful regardless of who's in office, regardless of what kind of economic downturn is going on. One of my favorite memes I've seen regarding this topic is about A1 bar or A1 steak sauce.
I haven't seen this, so I'm excited.
I'm
intrigued.
The year it was developed was the year of the Civil War. And so the meme was just like, we're in the middle of a civil war and somebody thought, hey, this is a great time for some steak sauce. And but, they're still around here. So obviously that's probably one of the most challenging times in our country's history. And, this steak sauce is still around.
Well, maybe they had to eat bad steak. So they're like, we need to make it saucy.
That's true.
Who knows? But the thing is that if you really look at most companies and companies with longevity, they have gone through huge economic downturns. They've gone through great economic times, and they figured out a way to make that work for them instead of against them.
Right. And you have to kind of take the challenges that are coming to you and find out how you can benefit from them, right? Everybody, even in a market downturn, you're looking at where the opportunities are. You should be looking for the things that you can capture or that you can grow in while the rest of your industry or the economy in general or whatever is shrinking. If you can't find those opportunities, then you're only going to struggle. And going back to what I know best, the mortgage business was a prime example, right? Everybody was eating well when rates were at 3%. Everyone was eating. It was very easy. Refis were out the door. It's super cheap to buy houses.
You just got to kind of sit there and people came to you.
It was easy. And, now that rates have gone up, you've seen that market shrink. So what you do in times like this is you try to capture more of the market share. If you're surviving and you're working with new partners and you're finding different ways to find clients, then when things get back to a more, profitable place for that industry, your market share is only going to grow with it. If you're doing all the things now to keep your business going and strengthen your business during the hard times, it becomes much easier to grow and scale during the easy times.
Yeah. One, it's like I was actually telling you the other day that I know very few realtors right now who are just realtors. So
lots of people have found side hustles.
And that's fine, right? If for some reason, you're struggling and you need to have a side hustle, then cool. Like when I first started my consulting business, when I first started, I still had my construction company. And then I also had an insurance agency, and consulting was very much a side hustle for me because I didn't know, okay, is this going to work out? Am I going to like it? All of the above. And then now, I don't have either of those two businesses anymore and I'm full on into financial consulting. But it wasn't overnight. It wasn't just like it kind of was one day. I just decided. but I already had that kind of that foundation built. And so don't get frustrated with yourself if maybe you need to, you need to have a side hustle to keep your main thing going, or vice versa. Maybe your main thing you're not into anymore, and so you want to try something else with the side hustle. It's okay to do two things at once. Like sometimes people act like that's a failure, but it's not.
If anything, it's the opposite, right? If you want to continue to do this while things are hard and you're finding another way to keep yourself financially afloat, there's nothing wrong with that. There is absolutely, you will strengthen yourself by continuing to grind away at the business that you want to do while, you do other things to keep yourself going. I mean, I think that's actually a strength that shows that you have that fortitude to continue on, to continue fighting for what you want and doing anything you can to survive in the meantime.
Yeah. And so, in controlling the controllables, in your business, there's so many things you can control, right? Who you're marketing to is a big one. Maybe primarily you were working with, like super middle class homeowners. And now those people are very tight. Like there's a huge pinch on the middle class and like lower middle class, especially in certain areas, but I think it's kind of countrywide. And so maybe we can divert some of our marketing to more, upper middle class and like the upper class, because they're still spending money. They still have the money to spend on more luxury type items or services. So maybe we can adjust our marketing. Or maybe is there a way to adjust our pricing? We don't want to undercut too much, but how do we balance that, And so, because like for instance, one of my best examples on controlling the controllables, and I just remembered it, is Golden Corral.
I was gonna bring up the Golden Corral story.
Okay, awesome. So we were just driving the other day. This was a few weeks ago, and all of a sudden I see Golden Corral, and I don't eat there, but sorry, Golden Corral, not really digging your food. But other people like it. It's cool. If you like it, yay. But anyway, so we're driving past, and I'm like, what in the world? The Golden Corral still exists.
When you think COVID killed almost every other buffet, we lost like Sweet Tomatoes, or I don't know who else, but almost every other buffet style type of company went away.
Yeah, I cannot think of another like buffet only restaurant that's still in existence. I really can't. Which I'm sure there's a few, but like in terms of like a major chain, right? So I was like, how did the Golden Corral out of everything survive? So I started looking into it, and it turned out it was a lot of really great decisions by the management of the franchisor. So their franchises. So the franchisor, they did a lot of things a little bit differently during COVID. So when COVID came down, instead of shutting down, they actually changed their business model just enough to be COVID compliant, but close enough that it didn't really injure the franchisee. Because the one thing about Golden Corral is they already had wait staff, kind of, sort of, like they would bring you your drinks and stuff like that. So they already had a little bit more staff than your standard buffet. So they converted that to a family style offering. So you would like kind of order, it was still buffet. You could eat what you wanted in the sense that it was all you can eat, but you had to say, okay, we want to eat some fried chicken and we want some mashed potatoes, and they would bring you out that. So kind of like converted to a family style restaurant versus you going up. And then as COVID restrictions came down, they continued to kind of have a really agile model in the sense that then you would go up and they would put the food on your plate instead of you touching the utensil and all these sorts of things. And they also did something with their franchise fees. So a lot of franchisors, they just cut their fees. They were like, okay, we'll give our franchisees a cut on the fee. Well, then that hurts the franchisor because they're now, sales are already down. And then if you cut the fee, well, then now they have even undercut their own cash flow even more. And that's a problem. So what Golden Corral did is they're like, no, you still need to pay us the full fee. But they got deals with suppliers, and they said, hey, if you buy your food from these specific suppliers, we will give you credits for your food costs. So that will help you. So they maintained their cash flow as much as they could. And they also helped their franchisees. And so they actually have grown since the end of COVID. And now they're like Golden Corral is taking over the world. And I attest it to, I mean, it's very strange. I'm very stoked about talking about Golden Corral. So I was like, how? And then I did all this research, like, oh my God, these people are brilliant.
Now she wants to own one, so.
I do. I'm still not going to eat there, but I do want to own one. I already have the perfect location picked out.
It's in a former Sweet Tomato spot.
Yeah, it's in a former Sweet Tomatoes. It's already ready to go. If somebody else isn't already thinking about putting a Golden Corral there, then they're crazy. I just need the coin ducats to make it happen. So.
Well, yeah, and I think, that adaptability is huge for being able to survive and, control the controllables. And you could think of the opposite example of not surviving and trying to take things and not responding to a market change.
Yeah.
Blockbuster. Blockbuster's the greatest example. They were kind of cocky when Netflix came about, and they would talk all the time about like, oh, okay, well, here's a different model, and they did their DVD delivery. Blockbuster did as well for a while, but ultimately just kind of felt like Netflix was a flash in the pan and they weren't going to survive, so they weren't going to adapt their model to what Netflix was doing. Meanwhile, Netflix is just taking what existed, and they came up with something new, but it's not something that other people couldn't copy. Obviously, Blockbuster started doing the same thing with the delivery of DVDs. They did not pivot into the streaming, and that's something they had the budget and the finances to be able to do. And you think that would have been a pretty easy pivot for them into what Netflix is now, this juggernaut that, they produce their own movies. They have contracts with actors and with, certain franchises that, they're going to produce X amount of movies that are direct to Netflix. And, so taking what's available and really controlling what you can control and just pivoting. I mean, COVID was, I think, the perfect example of controlling what you could control, right? And Golden Corral, I'm glad you brought it up because I was going to bring it up if you didn't, because that's the prime example of like, all right, here's where we're at. This is just what it is. We have to find a way to survive in this or we're just going to die. And so many businesses did die during COVID.
Yeah, and thinking to themselves, how do we make this work for our franchisees and for the franchisor, right? So I think, as I said, a lot of franchisors, they just cut their feet and they really undercut themselves, and then they couldn't maintain, and so then they went out of business. And if you got a business as a franchisor, then all your franchisees do too, right? So that wasn't really helping them at the long run. So I think so many times, and I feel like I say this every single episode, proactivity versus reactivity, right? And because especially in a COVID situation, it's easy to be reactive.
And in some ways you had to be. I mean, some new regulation comes across and, okay, well, we can't do this anymore. So, being smartly reactive, but also at the same time trying to be proactive and doing whatever you can. There were some businesses that were able to kind of reach out and work with the government to say, well, what if we did this? And they were able to create some regulations during that time to make things work. We talk about one of the things, I take Texas Roadhouse. During the beginning of COVID, Texas Roadhouse had this huge supply of meat, right? And they're like, oh, crap. What are we going to do? Nobody can come into our restaurants anymore.
But we got this meat.
So they started selling it. And they said, hey, look, we're going to sell if you want to come pick up steaks. They had a drive-through where they would bring out, you could buy their prime steaks. And then what did they do next? They started saying, hey, can we, here in Colorado, you could not serve alcohol to go. But they worked with the state, and the state said, you know what, that's fine. Let's go ahead and, you can now serve. They would sell you these pitchers of margaritas that you could take to go, so that if it's like you were eating at Texas Roadhouse, right? You go home, you cook your food, you have all the sides that they offered, and you could take these margaritas to go, and it was like you were eating there. And this is how they survived during that time. I went there several times to just go buy some steaks and take them home and grill them up. And it's about controlling what you can control. This is what we can do. You can come up with some creative solutions. You can work with whomever you need to work with to see if you can make things work in the current environment, rather than just saying, oh, well, this sucks. We're gonna fail because of this or because of this or because of that person.
Yeah. Well, it's like, so one of my mentors, Julia Pimsler, and she always says you can have results or you can have reasons. Right. And so you really have the choice. Am I going to have all these reasons why it didn't work or why I couldn't do it? Or am I going to have results towards my goals and what I'm doing? I think that's the same with the controllables in the sense that you have a lot more ability than you probably give yourself credit to really control your business and what's happening, no matter what's coming at you, right? Because there's always going to be something. It doesn't matter what year it is or time of year. I mean, there's always something that's going to help one person and hurt another. It just is. And you have the decision to take that thing and, to take that lemon and make it into lemonade, or just eat a lemon, which you actually like eating lemons.
I actually do like it. But sometimes that's what it takes, right? Sometimes it takes these situations to spark that creativity, or to spark something in you that creates the idea that actually makes your business thrive in those situations where, if you make that adjustment, you end up better off than you were before. I mean, how many times just in life do you find something that was so difficult and, you found yourself just kind of feeling sorry for yourself? Why did this happen? Why am I going through this? Only to come out on the other side and realize that because you got through it, you're in a much better position, or, you learned something that became valuable for you later on. I mean, we talk about a lot, us personally, coming from very different backgrounds to where we are now. And just a lot of the things that we learned along the way being very valuable to use in what we do now, even though they are seemingly completely unrelated.
Well, yeah, I mean, even what I do now, when I first started my concrete company, I was the salesperson. I knew sales, and that was the thing. And then when we found out the accountant had embezzled, then I didn't trust anyone. So I learned. But that's when everything changed. And honestly, had that not happened, I would probably still just be in sales. Like, I have no idea where my life would have led, but I'm telling you, the thought of it leading me to being a fractional CFO and loving doing financial consulting, I don't see that. And I really do love what I do. So it sucked at the time, but I'm so glad that happened, because that is what led me down this path to all these things that I love.
Yeah. And it's just a great example of, like, take the situation, get through it, deal with it, control what you can control, try to come out on the other side as well as you can. And you'll see the things that work out for you in the long run by just not feeling sorry for yourself and not just taking those excuses and laying down and, quitting.
Yeah. Well, it's like, so my current mentor, Taylor Welch, he says that you have the choice to make those things an asset or a liability, right? They can continue to hurt you. All this stuff that happens can continue to hurt you and bring you down and be a liability on your personal balance sheet, or you can make it an asset and it can be your greatest strength and something that you're using, And so just really focusing on that, like, how do I make these things that are happening work for me? How do I make them happen for me instead of to me?
Yeah, and that's such a mindset shift, because it's just very important. We all know those people who just constantly, no matter what happens, everything's happening to them. Well, I can't believe this has happened. Yeah, it's the Eeyores of the world. Well, this is, everyone, constantly feeling sorry for themselves. And those people, nobody wants to be around those people, first of all. Having somebody who constantly feels like everything is wrong with the world is just draining to everyone around them. So really having that mindset of, okay, this sucks, this may be tough, I'm going to get through it. How do I get through it? What do I do to get through it? And really just trying to take everything as a lesson that's going to harden you, that's going to strengthen you in the long run. It's a lot of it's very cliche, but that is truly how you get to the other side and become this much stronger, much more, in tune person with how you resolve your problems.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because it's a choice. Like anything else, it truly is a choice. It might not feel like it in the time, but you have a lot more power within yourself than you probably give yourself credit for to change your own perspective on a lot of things and really take control of those things in your life. And okay, how do I change my story?
Right. You can't change what happens to you, but you can always change how you react to what happens to you.
Yeah, and you can always change the meaning you're giving it, because we get to decide what meaning we give the events. in business, in our personal lives, in everything. And so we have the choice to make those things a good thing or a bad thing, because it's all about our perspective.
Yeah, I think that's the main difference between a lot of people that you look up to and you think that they have everything. A lot of it's just how they react to those situations, right? How do you get through those tough times? How do you push yourself through those hard times? The person who is in super good shape that you look up to, well, what do? They push through those hard reps. They continue to go. When they don't feel well, when they feel too tired, they show up to the gym every day. Those people who are business, successes, how did they get there? It's not that they had this one great thing that drove them to become this huge success. It's a lot of down days. It's a lot of dark days. It's a lot of hard days, and working through those and getting to the next step that make them that success.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's like with the light bulb, somebody asked Thomas Edison, like, why don't you just quit? Like, you've done, you've done like 800 tries and you failed every time. You have 800 failures. Why don't you just realize this is not going to work? And he was like, no, I have figured out 800 ways it doesn't work. And that means that one of these will. And he did. It was like over 1,000 tries, but he figured out how to make the light bulb and change the entire world. So what would this world be like if he had listened to those people and gave up after 800 tries, or maybe earlier, But he had such a singularity of vision and knew that this was possible and was determined to make it work. And he failed in a lot of people's minds over and over and over and over and over again. But he's not remembered for that.
Right.
He's remembered for the one time it worked. And so a lot of times I think people think, oh, if I just find that one thing, if I just have that one, the $1 million, $1 billion idea. But that's not real, because the reality is the 1,000 times you fail to find the one. And if you're not willing to fail the 1,000 times, you're not going to get that one.
Yeah.
And so you need to keep pushing through, and you need to say, okay, this isn't a failure. This is a way it doesn't work. And, one of the other things Taylor says is he talks about that when you have those, failures, that actually creates more certainty, because when you first start, you have, 100 million trillion different paths. So every path you go down that leads you to where you don't want to go, or is a perceived failure, is actually more certainty that the next path will be the right one. So looking at it in that perspective, that it's a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things we tell our kids, right? I mean, you have to be willing to suck at something first in order to be good at it later.
Yeah. Oh man. I feel like I say that like 3 times a week right now. Like, you gotta suck before you're ever gonna be good. You gotta suck. Like, our son's doing violin, and that's like, ooh, you gotta suck. But he's doing good, and
he's enjoying it, and that's just part of it. I mean, that's controlling what you can control, right? You can't just expect things to be perfect all the time, and life to be grand. There's always going to be challenges. There's always going to be hardships. There's always going to be something that you feel like is a huge setback. But in a lot of times, that's where the greatest things are born, is from those hardships and from those struggles. And that's how you push through to the other side. And, so it's all about you and how you react to it.
Yeah. So just think to yourself, okay, how can I make this work for me? And how can I have this, what seeming uncontrollable situation, how can I make it to my benefit? Because it doesn't matter what it is, there is a way to make it work for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just keep going.
Keep pushing through. And then we'll catch you on the next time.
Have a good one. This is Blue Collar Wealth Club, and we'll talk to you later.